Hello and welcome to the Old Garage number 43. I'm Wild Bill and we've got some questions and answers. We've got a spooky silliness, after all it is October 31st, and a really cool shout out you're going to want to check out. So let's get on with it. Alright, first one we have came from the Brickyard special, and it's from Alex Kalish, and he asked the question. This is great history on the channel, thank you. Captain Eddie told me, that's Eddie Rickenbacker, when I was about 9 years old, that he used to own IMS, that's the International Motor Speedway, Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Is that true? Yes, it is. Rickenbacker had a long and productive life, and he's got an episode coming. Actually, there's going to be several on him over the next couple of years. But yeah, he owned it. I think actually, I think it was Walden Lemon Jello actually jumped on the thread. And yes, he did own it for 13 years, I believe, or no, 18 years. Yeah, from like 27 till 45. And yeah, we're going to hear more about Eddie Rickenbacker too. I mean, he even had his own make a car for a time. So yes, he absolutely did own the Speedway at one point. So cool. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay. And also from the Old Garage, a question from Daniel Silverthorne, and he asked, even though I likely won't see the answer for months, I'll ask anyway, what does Wild Bill's automotive library look like, especially after starting the channel? Well, my library is scattered. You'll see this first picture. This is kind of like my main bookcase where I have, some old anthology books. Since starting the channel, I've added a few more. The Encyclopedia of automobiles. I mean, David Burgess Weiss. I mean, he's pretty much the gold standard as far as that's concerned. I've picked up quite a few other books. For example, the Alum publications rather, of what were the authorized makes of cars in the U.S. And of course, magazines. Now, in here, this is a combination of a couple different ones from various auto clubs. You have, the Brass Bulb Club. There's Model T clubs. There's a bunch of them in these. There's about 200 magazines all set in this little closet, or more than that, covering pretty much pre-World War II stuff. Although a couple of them will get into the 50s and the 60s, muscle cars and things like that. And I've collected a lot of those over the last couple of years as well, plus the ones that I had prior. So yeah, my library has grown, and once the channel grows a whole lot more and is making enough cash to spend more on my library, we'll be increasing it. So that's my library as it sits, but I'm always looking to grow it, that's for sure. Okay, and also this one's from the episode on Alexander Govan, and this was from James MacArthur, and he it said that you mentioned that Govan's first car had an interesting shift position, a T, and I'm used to 4 on the floor standard pattern, and did almost kill a friend with a 3 on the tree. Just how many different or unusual shift patterns are there? The list is long, actually. The H pattern that you're used to for your 4 on the floor was actually invented by Panhard and Levasseur. They were the first company to actually have a gated shift like that. The earliest shifters were actually sequential, but usually you had a lever on next to the driver, which, all the way forward was first, the middle was second, all the way rear was third, or it could be, you can mix it around, from there. But the earliest ones were sequential. Of course, famously the shifter on the Model T was a pedal. And of course the Govan's car had that T pattern. You had also some that were done with a lever, particularly some of the very early belt-driven transmissions, where basically you had a rubbing lever that would move the belt to different positions. You had that. Also, there were a number of transmissions that also combined as clutches. Particularly, you see that with cars like the Mets, where the transmission is basically and clutch are basically a couple of cones that come together that have sandpaper and grit on them, and where you position the cones, or if they're connected, is whether or not you have that. And those were typically done, again, by a lever. And in some cases, the lever would actually move the entire engine, because in order to put the crankshaft and whatever was attached to it in right line for that type of friction style transmission. So yeah, you had the sequentials, you had levers, three on the tree came about, you know, that was between the wars, later on in between the wars. And my first car was actually one of those. It was a 48 DeSoto. And yeah, you can almost kill someone if you don't know where everything is. But you had a lot of different methods. Every car back then, you know, when you get, you know, pre-World War I, and even pre-World War II for that matter, I mean, every car was its own very unique driving experience. They were so different. You know, you didn't start seeing real standardization in the automotive industry until the 1930s. So yeah, there were a lot of different ways to shift a car back then. It was pretty cool. Okay, and from the Eugene Brely episode, we have another question from James MacArthur, and he asks, I can't seem to wrap my head around this engine design. Is there a way to see the picture with a walkthrough with it? Sure, we can do that. There were a couple of companies that made these types of engines, most notably Errol Johnson and Goebern Brely. Here's the Johnson type engine, and you'll see that what they've done is, in this case, it's a horizontal type engine, and you have the series of cams that bring when the pistons come together in the center, fuel is injected, it compresses or it sparks. Both pistons leave at head out the same time, which are connected to a single camshaft or drive shaft. So it's just a bunch of levers, and this particular, the Errol Johnson was a single cylinder with two pistons in the cylinder, and it was actually started just by pulling a rope through the floorboards to get it going. Now the Goebern Brely engine is a little different. It's a vertical engine, as pictured here now, and so you have cams on the top and the bottom, which are connecting the cylinders to the crankshaft. And in this case, you have a two-cylinder, four-piston engine. And one of the things that was able to do with these type of engines is that it, in many ways, obviated the need for a carburetor. Because if you have, if you could just drip the fuel in there right between them, it was a whole lot easier and cheaper, and a lot of people liked that. And both the Errol Johnsons and the Goebern Brelys were very popular, and they were good running cars. They do have some disadvantages. They're not particularly high revving engines, either one. And mostly because there's just so much happening mechanically, and there's so much movement going on inside the engine that you're not going to get more than 1,500, maybe 2,000 RPM out of them. And another issue is that there's also a bit of mechanical energy loss in the process. Although they can be very torquey, the horsepower was typically a bit lower than it would be for a similarly two or four piston engine that did not have all of these extra contraptions. But they were used mostly because they were very torquey. Therefore, they were great, for hill climbs and the terrain that required it, and also that carbureting was so much easier. All you had to do was just drip fuel right down into between the pistons, and off you go. So yeah, hopefully those pictures helped out a bit. Okay, and also from the same episode on Eugene Brely, James MacArthur asked another question. Says that you mentioned that these vehicles sold well. To get an idea of who was producing the most cars in the vintage era, could you run through maybe the top makers and their sales counts at various years, maybe at 5 or 10 year intervals? Yeah, sure. Let's start with 1890. And in that year, the #1 manufacturer was Benz. And you'd think maybe it would have been Daimler or Dédian Bouton or even Peugeot, but Dédian, Bouton, and Peugeot were making steam cars at that time. And after the the Paris World Exposition of 1889, it was Benz and Daimler that really took the blue ribbons at the show. But Daimler was not really focused on cars. He was more wanted to just sell the engines, whereas Benz wanted to sell the cars. And so 1890, he actually built and sold a little over 3 dozen cars in 1890, which, yeah, 3 dozen is a world record for 1890. But yeah, that's what it was. Now, 1895, Benz was still in the lead, although some French companies were starting to catch up with them. Didion Bouton and Peugeot specifically, because they had moved away from the steam engines and went to gas engines. And also at that time, a new upstart, Panhard and Levasseur, was coming. However, Benz was, by 1895, producing about 400 cars a year. And that still kept Benz on top as the #1 manufacturer. Now, it was 1900 that we have somebody new. 1900, the winner's going to be Didion Bouton. Not only were they selling engines, but they were selling cars, and they were the first to exceed 1,000 cars in a single year. That was in 1900. They were the first to do it. So at being in 1900, yeah, Didion Bouton was #1, but they did not hold that position long. They were overtaken by Peugeot pretty quickly, and then within a few years of that, Oldsmobile took the front seat, which is who is the winner for 1905 is Oldsmobile, able to produce 5,000 cars that year. And then, of course, 1910 and through the war, now it's Ford. You know, in 1910, I mean, they were producing 15,000 plus cars a year, even more. By 1915, they were in the hundreds of thousands, like like 328,000 in 1915. So, yeah, Ford took it from there, and then I really haven't looked too far into the 1920 and 1925 yet, so we'll catch those later. But yeah, that's yeah, year 1890, Benz, 1895, Benz, 1900, Didion Bouton, 1905, Oldsmobile, 1910, Ford, 1915, Ford. So there we go. Okay, all right. Time for some spooky silliness now, because that's the questions we had. And this was actually a James MacArthur idea. He suggested I do that, because after all, this is Halloween. And so we're going to do my top 5 makes of vintage cars with scary names. Okay? At number 5, now I'm going to say scary is a relative term. Okay? So I'm going to say that things that I consider scary. And number 5 is going to be Arsenal. Now, the Arsenal was built in England. It only was built for 2 years. There weren't a lot of them made. But, you know, when you think of a car, you don't usually think of an Arsenal unless it's a zombie apocalypse vehicle. Which, you know, this is the kind of day where you would be considering, you know, going zombie hunting. So, my number 5, Arsenal. Number 4, scary make of car, Hertz. Yeah, I mentioned in the last episode, I think it was, or maybe 2 the old garages ago, that yes, the rental car company, Hertz, did make cars from 1925 to 1927. But think about it. Would you want to drive a car that hurts? You know, I mean, you know, it hurts to drive this thing. Yeah, that's a little scary to me. But it's number 4, and that was, of course, an American make. But there's one that's even worse, and that was a French car. And that's hurt you. Okay, so is that the car saying, I'm going to hurt you? Or is that you saying, I'm going to hurt you driving this car? You know, one of those. They were made in France. Actually, it lasted quite a long time, 1896 through to 1929. But hurt you was quite a name. Of course, it's a French thing. You know how they are. But yeah, hurt you. That was my number 3 scary name. Number 2 scary name. This is going to surprise a lot of you. It's Dodge. Now, why is Dodge scary? Now, of course, American car. They've been traded all over the place now, but started in 1914, still making cars today. But here's why they're scary. You go take some big black truck or something like that, put a big ram's head on the front of it, and write the word Dodge on the grill. You're going to move out of the way. Okay? Dodge, get out of the way. This thing's coming through. Yeah, that's a scary thing. All right? To me, it is. Yeah, that's number 2. Number 1, scary car name, More. Now, this is a French car made, actually lasted a long time, 1895 to 1956. Quite a racing pedigree with this particular car. But Mors, M-O-R-S, is actually Latin for death. So basically, this is a death car. Indeed, their motto that they used was "Death is the gate to life." Okay, I mean, how morbid and scary does it get to drive a car that is called Death? Yeah. So yeah, those are my top 5 scary vintage car brand names. Okay, so shout out. I've got a cool one. It's a new, pretty young channel, but really like what this guy's doing. It's called Pre-War Motoring. Now, he's put together videos of classic cars that other people have sent to him of them running and giving tours of. He's also put up some of his own videos, also some vintage film, that was used back in the day. And it's worth a good binge watch, and you can binge watch his whole channel right now in about 2 or 3 hours. So, but it's definitely worth checking out. And keep in mind, there's probably going to be, we're talking about a collaboration between us in the not too distant future. I mean, he lives too far away, so he'll have to do something via Zoom or elsewhere. But yeah, Pre-War Motoring. Check him out. Great channel. Like and subscribe his stuff. He needs the support. Let's get him growing. So that is what we have for the Scary Spooky The Old Garage today, and we will see you next time. Peace.